The night was deep, and darkness swallowed the end of the country road. The engine's hum was jarring in the stillness, like some low, labored breathing, standing in eerie contrast to the dead silence of the trees lining the road. My fingers tightened slightly on the wheel, feeling the rough leather beneath them as I tried to keep my focus. Hours of driving had left me weary, my eyelids heavy, my thoughts sluggish. The car was filled with the faint scent of motor oil and aged leather. Headlights cut through the road ahead, but the oppressive weight of the darkness lingered, unshaken. The radio host droned on about something meaningless, his voice distant and hollow, as if coming from another world. I had been driving for hours, and the empty road stretched endlessly ahead of me. The forest loomed on either side, its tangled branches flickering past my window like skeletal fingers, slow and deliberate in the night. I regretted not stopping at a motel earlier, but along this road, I hadn't seen a single building, just endless blackness pressing in from all sides. Just as I was considering turning around, my headlights carved through the dark and caught something, a figure standing by the roadside. I froze for a moment, my heartbeat quickening. There was someone there. She stood still, half consumed by the night, the dim glow of my headlights catching the faint shimmer of a white dress, as if it still held onto the last remnants of daylight. Instinctively, I pressed the brake. The tires groaned against the asphalt, breaking the silence like a heavy exhale. The air itself seemed to still, and in that quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. She didn't move. She didn't wave me down. She simply stood there, one hand slightly raised, thumb pointing upward in a lazy hitchhiker's gesture. I couldn't make out her face, her long hair veiled her features, but she looked impossibly thin, her shoulders slumped as though weighed down by something unseen. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the lock button. A strange unease crept up my spine, cold and slow. This time of night. This place. A girl standing alone on the roadside like this. Something wasn't right. But reason pushed past the discomfort. Maybe she was just lost. A traveler walking from some distant town. I exhaled, trying to shake the tension from my shoulders, and unlocked the door. Slowly, I pushed it open. She got in without hesitation. Her movements were smooth, almost unnaturally fluid. The hem of her dress brushed against the seat, a whisper-soft sound, like a feather drifting to the ground. The door clicked shut. And with it, the air inside the car seemed to shift, growing heavier, colder. I started the engine and pulled back onto the road. She remained silent, hands resting lightly on her lap, fingers barely touching the fabric of her dress. Her posture was slightly hunched forward, as if listening intently, not to me, but to the wind outside, or perhaps to something deeper, something I couldn't hear. The radio crackled. The station signal wavered, white noise seeping in, accompanied by a faint whisper, something just below the threshold of understanding. I glanced at the passenger seat. She hadn't moved. Her head was slightly lowered, and in the dim glow of the dashboard, her shadow stretched long and deep, merging seamlessly with the seat beneath her. A wave of unease rolled through me, heavy and suffocating. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. The tires droned against the asphalt, a monotonous, muffled sound echoing through the empty night. The forest around me grew denser, its shadows flickering under the headlights, shifting like countless unseen eyes watching silently as my car passed. I tried to shake off the unease, to focus on the drive, but there was something suffocating about the air inside the car, an invisible weight pressing down on my chest. The girl in the passenger seat still hadn't spoken. Not a single word. Not even the sound of her breathing. It was as if her presence was nothing more than an illusion. Her hands remained resting gently on her lap, her long fingers loosely intertwined, their pallor almost unnatural. I stole a quick glance at her, only to see her head turn slightly, eyes shifting toward the window. A slow, crawling chill crept up my spine. I tore my gaze away and locked my eyes on the road ahead. The air inside the car grew heavier, like an unseen mist settling in, thick and stifling. I reached for the window controls, hoping a bit of fresh air would clear my head. The moment the cold wind rushed in, the radio crackled. A sharp burst of static filled the car, followed by something even stranger, music. An old song, slow and haunting, drifted through the speakers, carrying a sorrowful, unplaceable nostalgia. The melody was delicate, lingering on the edge of memory, like a voice calling from a distant time. I didn't recognize it. I had no idea why I changed the station. But it was there now, humming softly through the car, wrapping itself around the darkness outside. And then, the girl started to hum along. Her voice was light, almost airy, yet it carried an emptiness that made my skin crawl. This wasn't just a song to her. It felt like something ingrained in her, something she had sung before, many times, perhaps in countless nights like this, in a place I couldn't begin to imagine. My grip on the steering wheel tightened, my knuckles turning white. The trees along the roadside seemed to twist, distorting as they slipped past my windows. Even the road itself no longer felt familiar. My GPS was useless, its screen flickering with jumbled routes, the automated voice repeating, recalculating route, over and over. But no matter how far I drove, the road ahead remained straight. No turns. No intersections. I had no idea if I was still on the same highway, or if I had strayed into some place I was never meant to be. The girl's humming ceased. Silence settled between us once more. And yet, I could feel her watching me. I refused to look. I told myself not to turn my head, not to check the seat beside me. But in the corner of the rearview mirror, I caught the faintest glimpse of her reflection, blurred, unfocused, as if she wasn't really there. The night stretched on. The road extended endlessly forward, no end, no exit. The temperature inside the car dipped again. The darkness outside was absolute, an abyss swallowing everything in its path. And I was being pulled deeper into it. The engine's roar felt distant now, as if it had been severed from reality, leaving behind only the monotonous sound of tires grinding against asphalt, a never-ending funeral dirge. My grip on the steering wheel was rigid, my fingers ice cold, my knuckles aching from the tension. Even with the windows shut tight, I could feel the night seeping in, a phantom chill brushing against my neck, like invisible fingertips tracing over my skin. The girl in the passenger seat remained silent. Her shadow stretched across the door, elongated by the faint glow of the dashboard lights, contorted into an unnatural shape. She never moved, never spoke. She simply stared ahead, motionless. Her face was pale as paper, her eyes deep, so deep they seemed to swallow the light. This drive was taking far longer than it should have. It should have been a 30-minute trip at most, but the road stretched endlessly before me, every second stretching into an unbearable silence. A growing sense of dread clawed at my ribs. I glanced at the GPS screen, and my breath caught in my throat. The map was gone. The entire route had vanished, leaving only a blank, gray void on the screen, no roads, no landmarks, no direction, just static emptiness, like corrupted data. I lifted my gaze back to the road. It was still there, straight, unbroken, but the darkness beyond was no longer just the night. It was something deeper. A void. An abyss that sent an instinctive, primal terror rippling through my body. This road had no end. A dull ache coiled in my chest, my breathing turning shallow. Each breath burned, as if laced with frost. I wanted to speak. I wanted to ask the girl something, anything, but my throat constricted, the words choking before they could escape. Then, she moved. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her head toward me. And for the first time, our eyes met. She was close. Too close. But all I felt was a profound, bone-deep sense of unfamiliarity. Her lips curved, just slightly. Not enough to be called a real smile. But something about it made my stomach lurch. It was a look of understanding, of amusement, like she had seen me for exactly what I was. Like she had marked me. And then, she spoke.
Thank you, Joris.
The blood in my veins turned to ice. My name. She knew my name. I slammed my foot on the brakes. The tires screeched against the pavement, the car jerking forward with a violent jolt. My body lurched, nearly slamming into the wheel. Heart hammering, I whipped my head toward the passenger seat. It was empty. The door was shut. The window was sealed. She was gone. Just gone. My stomach twisted violently. My throat was raw, parched. My hands trembled uncontrollably against the wheel, my heart beat a frantic, erratic pounding against my ribs. The darkness outside felt heavier now, thick and suffocating, stretching around me like an unseen web, pulling me into its silent, endless abyss. But her voice lingered. Soft. Faint. A whisper that refused to fade, drifting through the air like an echo from a forgotten place. She shouldn't have known my name. I had never told her. The end of the road was still swallowed by darkness. I couldn't tell if I was actually moving forward or if I had fallen into some endless, looping nightmare. Then, the headlights caught a glimpse of a weathered road sign. My pupils constricted. It was a sign leading to an abandoned town. My mind went blank, my fingers digging into the leather of the steering wheel. This place. It had been abandoned for decades. A fire, sudden and merciless, had consumed the entire town, leaving no survivors. Among the dead was a young woman. Her photograph had been printed in the newspapers, her white dress standing out starkly against the grainy black and white ink. Her face, identical to the one in my rearview mirror. The car kept accelerating, but the road ahead had started to blur, warping as though the night itself was distorting, erasing any trace of reality. I wanted to stop. I wanted to turn around. But my body wouldn't move. I was bound, held in place by something unseen, something that refused to let me go.
Thank you, Joris.
Her voice came again, soft, delicate, so close it might as well have been whispered against my ear. A breath of cold air traced along my neck, feather-light, like the touch of something both familiar and utterly foreign. In the mirror, she leaned forward. Slowly. Deliberately. Her face edged closer, the corners of her lips curling ever so slightly into something that was almost, but not quite, a smile. Her eyes reflected me. And in mine, only endless, devouring darkness.